Now, after this broad bill that Democrats wanted to send $60 billion to Ukraine, and mostly the Republicans in the House, I think to their credit, said, look, we're not voting for $60 billion more for Ukraine. We won't even consider it unless we first secure our own border. Why would we give $60 billion to Ukraine to fortify its border against Russia when our own border is being invaded and attacked, and we have no means to keep people out that the law says have to be kept out, that even Democratic mayors and governors are admitting they cannot accommodate? And so there was a negotiation to try and show the American public on whose behalf only these House Republicans were speaking, saying, we're not going to send $60 billion of our money to Ukraine when our own government gets nothing, our own country gets nothing. So Mitch McConnell and his allies negotiated a bipartisan bill with Chuck Schumer that was designed to pretend that in exchange for sending $60 billion to Ukraine and $17 billion to Israel and $10 billion to Gaza and $4 billion more for Yemen, just sending money all over the place to all these wars, they would at least spend a small percentage of it, $20 billion, on fortifying the border. And it's true that the Border Patrol union, that's generally considered pretty right-wing when it comes to immigration, supported this bill. But that's because there's a lot of money going to the Border Patrol. It increases their salaries. They get to hire and buy more resources and more things. So they're doing what they should do, defending their workers, but it doesn't mean that it's actually a good bill for dealing with the problem at the border. And Republicans took one look at this bill, and by Republicans, I really mean like the rank and file, along with Donald Trump, and they said this bill is woefully inadequate. This is not a real border security bill, and we're not going to send $60 billion to Ukraine in order to, in exchange for something that we don't think is real help to the United States. And once Trump said this bill was inadequate and the Republican base rose up in indignation over it, the House Republican leadership came out and said that this bill has no chance to pass the House. It's dead on arrival. Don't even bother to have a vote in the Senate. They had a vote in the Senate anyway, and it failed. This was a bill that Mitch McConnell negotiated, and yet only 4 Republicans, Mitt Romney, a couple others, voted yes. Even Mitch McConnell ended up voting no on this bill that he himself championed once he saw that it was going to fail, once he saw the anger over it. And now the problem for the Biden White House and Mitch McConnell, who have the same top priority, which is getting money to Ukraine, is, well, how do we get money to Ukraine now? First, the Republicans in the House told us they won't consider a aid package to Ukraine unless it is accompanied by border security, but we gave the most we're willing to give on border security, and they still won't vote for it. And there are a lot of Republicans who are saying we won't vote for any money more to Ukraine. And then there are some House Republicans saying we won't vote for Ukraine unless there's offsetting costs that ensure the debt and the deficit doesn't increase by virtue of financing the war in Ukraine. Cut $60 billion from the IRS budget if you want to send $60 billion to the IRS. They tried all that. It failed. And now the Biden White House is desperate to get money to Ukraine, as we're going to show you in a second. But Mike Johnson seems quite desperate to get money to Israel now. And he can't figure out how to do it. So what he said was, I'm just going to introduce a bill in the House that'll just be a standalone bill to send money to Israel. He knew he needed Democratic votes to get that. And so he just removed the parts where they would have cut spending to offset it. When Mike Johnson was elected Speaker, he said, I'm not going to approve any new spending unless there's offsetting cuts to our spending to balance it out. He abandoned that principle for Israel. He knew he needed Democratic votes, so he took it out. If it were in there, we'd have no chance of getting Democratic votes. And nonetheless, the way he brought it to the floor was like an emergency measure. It needed 2/3 to pass, and it failed overwhelmingly. Here's Politico yesterday, quote, House fails to pass a standalone Israel aid bill. Now, if you've been watching politics for any amount of time, you know that one of the least likely things is that a bill that does nothing but send money to Israel would ever be treated in any way other than with great reverence. And yet, the politics around financing other countries' wars and the war in Israel itself have really changed, and the bill failed. Quote, it's just a political stunt by the Republicans and the speaker, said Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, summing up Democrats' feeling on the measure. In other words, the Democrats don't want to send money to Israel because they know if they do, they're going to lose the leverage over Republicans to get them to agree to send money to Ukraine, which is the only thing they really care about. Because the Republicans cannot hold up money to Israel because they rely too much on Jewish voters, on the pro-Israel lobby, and they cannot be in a position where they look like they're the only ones obstructing money to Israel. And the hope of the Democrats is to say, we know you're so desperate to send money to Israel that you're going to say yes to our main priority, which is sending $60 billion to Ukraine. Again, nowhere in here is anything about the American people, the priorities that they really care about. In fact, last night we showed you the quote where Mitch McConnell said, and it was reported in the New York Times, that he doesn't really care about the border security as much as he cares about getting $60 billion to Ukraine. So of course the bill Mitch McConnell negotiated ended up being very weak on border security because he doesn't care about that. He admitted that. He only cares about getting $60 billion to Ukraine, and he knew he couldn't do that unless he pretended that the bill also contains some things to help the American people, the people who elected him and he's supposed to represent. Here's though what happened. Quote, the House failed to pass a clean $17.6 billion Israel aid bill on Tuesday as Congress struggles to find some vehicle that could clear critical money for foreign allies. Why is Politico editorializing that way and calling it critical money for foreign allies? Quote, the measure to aid the U.S. ally in its war against Hamas went down 250 to 180 and was considered under an expedited procedure requiring 2/3 support. Nearly 4 dozen Democrats voted yes, while more than a dozen Republicans opposed the measure. Quote, there's no time for hesitation, said Speaker Mike Johnson, alongside Amir Ohana, the Speaker of the Israeli Knesset, on Tuesday. Quote, history beckons us to act boldly and decisively to defend Israel and our own citizens. I really have no idea what he's talking about there. Some of the hostages, a few of them, that Hamas took from Israel are American citizens because there are a lot of Americans who go to Israel to enlist in the Israeli military. And obviously Hamas was taking people without having any idea what their nationality was. There were a lot of hostages who were of Thai nationality as well. Thailand didn't consider it their duty to treat that war as their own because Hamas had Thai citizens, just like Israel often kills Americans. Just killed an American teenager in the West Bank. Last year killed an American journalist in Gaza, lied about it, said it was an accident. Their own investigation revealed it was deliberate, or that the Israelis did it. So the United States doesn't consider us at war with Israel just because Israel kills American citizens. Just like we're not at war with Ukraine, even though Ukraine just allowed Gonzalo Lira to die in prison, and he's an American citizen who was only in prison for criticizing Zelensky. Sending $17 billion to Israel benefits Israelis, not Americans. But that is apparently Mike Johnson's primary objective. Now, this screen is not working, so I'm going to just have to indicate which ones I want. Here's an article from Axios that basically is designed to show that more U.S. aid to Israel has been given than to any other country over decades by a pretty decent amount. We give $4 billion to Israel, whether or not they're at war or not. That was a deal negotiated between Barack Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu, right as Obama and Biden were leaving office. They reached a record-setting deal with Israel to give Israel $4 billion over 10 years, a $40 billion deal basically. Some of that money has to be spent buying weapons from American arms dealers, which enriches arms dealer executives but doesn't do much for the American people. So we give money to the Israelis so they can buy weapons from Raytheon and General Dynamics, but they spend about 25% of whatever they want, including their own companies. And here's the graph from Axios that shows U.S. economic and military aid to Israel from 1951 to 2020. And you can see that in the 1950s and the 1960s, the amounts are very low. Israel was not really a priority either for the US government or for American Jews in the 50s and 60s. And then suddenly in 1970, with the Yom Kippur War and the other wars Israel fought in the early 1970s, including the 1967 war, under first President Nixon, it went up during those wars. And then it just basically stayed at this, $5 to $10 billion level. And then here in 2020 is Biden's increase, $14.3 billion, that jumps up. No country gets anywhere near the spending. I mean, some years we give more to a country we're trying to help, like Afghanistan or Ukraine, to sustain a war. But in general, over the years, Israel has received far more financial aid, military aid from the United States than any other country. Here's what Axios says about this. And maybe on the break we can fix the screen. Quote, as part of an agreement reached under the Obama administration, Israel receives $3.8 billion annually for its military and missile defense systems. Israel is the largest recipient of U.S. foreign military financing, which has represented around 15% of the country's defense budget in recent years. Most U.S. assistance comes in form of weapon grants, and more than 80% of Israel's weapons imports came from the U.S. between 1950 and 2020. Now, the remarkable thing about how much money we give to Israel and how much more money Biden and Mike Johnson and most Republicans and Democrats want to send to Israel now is that millions of Israelis have a better standard of living than millions of Americans. And yet those Americans are told, even though Israelis have a better standard of living than you have to work so that we can send your money to finance Israel's military and their wars. Here's the Jerusalem Post on January 5th of 2023, celebrating a very impressive achievement from Israel. Quote, Israel is among the top 10 countries with the longest life expectancies. Israel boasts one of the highest life expectancies in the world while managing to maintain low healthcare costs. Congratulations to Israel. It's incredibly impressive to have such a vibrant and effective and low-cost health care system that their citizens live very, very long lives. That's fantastic. Congratulations. Quote, Israel has the 10th highest life expectancy in the world, according to research conducted by NICE RX, which says Israelis have a life expectancy of 83.49 years, 81.98 years for men and 84.91 years for women. Taking the number one spot on the list is Hong Kong, followed by Japan, Switzerland, Singapore, Italy, Spain, Australia, Iceland, and South Korea. You'll notice one country that is not, in fact, in front of Israel when it comes to life expectancy, and that's the United States. The United States is actually well behind Israel in terms of the amount of years that a citizen of the United States can expect to live versus a citizen of Israel. They have universal health care, access to extremely effective and low-cost health care. Their citizens aren't drowning in medical debt, aren't worried about having to go to the ER as their primary care physician. It's a great country with a very high standard of living. Higher, in fact, than a lot of Americans, millions of Americans, who watch their government send enormous sums of money over to Israel. Money that could obviously help the lives of American citizens instead. Here from the OECD report in April of 2016, that's the OECD Health Policy Overview. That's the organization that tracks these health statistics. Quote, Israel has built a universal health system at relatively low cost. Health spending was 7.5% of GOP in 2013, below the OECD average of 8.9%, although the health spending share of GDP has been increasing rapidly, particularly in recent years. Israel has developed a sophisticated program to monitor quality of primary care. While the Israeli population enjoys good health outcomes and the health system performs fairly well, there are specifics, health workers and hospital care in particular, where policy attention is needed. Now, as everyone who lives in the United States knows, there is no system of universal health care in the United States. People have to rely on their ability to pay private health insurance costs and then medical costs, because oftentimes the insurance doesn't cover it. They're very large deductibles. You know the whole situation. And a lot of people have no health care insurance or real access to medical treatment at all. But in Israel, they do. They have universal health care. It's a very impressive achievement as well. Here from the International Trade Administration on October of 2023, so just the day before, actually, October 6, 2023, the day before the attack on on Israel by Hamas. Here is the report on Israel. Quote, Israel's healthcare system is advanced by international standards. Israel provides universal healthcare coverage to Israeli citizens and permanent residents via 4 independent health management organizations, HMOs, and a network of mandated benefit packages, including hospital, primary specialty, mental health, and maternity care, as well as prescription drugs and other services. Israeli health facilities are modern and receptive to innovative technologies and procedures. Really, it sounds like a fantastic place to get sick. There are American Jews who send their kids to Israel because education is cheaper there, but also of higher quality often. There are all sorts of benefits that Israeli citizens have that American citizens do not. It's very odd to watch many billions of dollars go from the American treasury into the Israeli treasury, given that this is the case. I don't know if we have the next. Yeah, we do. Okay, so let's look at the United States, the country that sends all these billions of dollars to Israel. The situation is quite different in the United States. Here from NPR on March 25th of 2023, quote, live free and die, the sad state of U.S. life expectancy. Life expectancy continues to decline in the U.S. as it rebounds in other countries. Sad state of affairs for life expectancy in the United States. Here from NPR, you can see United States life expectancy versus comparable other countries. Remember, it was 81 years for Israeli men, 84 years for Israeli women. In the United States, in 2021, it was 76.1 years. Now, obviously, that was low in part because of COVID, although not much lower. But you can see in the years before that, it was 78 years old, 77 years old. It had been increasing slightly, but nowhere near other advanced democracies and nowhere near Israel. Remember, Israel is way up here at 81 to 84. It's significantly higher than the United States, than where the United States is at. So again, it seems like an odd situation that we are sending billions of dollars to them. If you would think that if the priority were actually the American people, that would not be the case, at least until Americans have the same standard of living as Israel. We would probably tell Israel, look, you should pay for your own wars and your own military, especially if you want to keep expanding your land and occupying places like the West Bank, where we tell you we don't want you there because it harms our national security when the whole world says that it's illegal. If you want to really do that, go ahead, but we can't pay for your wars that happen as a result, for your expansion into territory and your conquering of territory and your destruction of land that the entire world says is not yours to destroy or to occupy. And if you choose to do that, we can't finance your decision to do that. We can't ask our population who's living 7 or 8 years less, who's dying 7 or 8 years sooner than your population, to pay for your military and for your wars, and yet that's exactly what's happening. Just like we're sending $60 billion to Ukraine on top of the $120 billion that we already sent, even though we know for certain that a lot of that money is being stolen by a country that has been notorious for being the most corrupt in Europe for many, many years. Here from the Texas Tribune in June of 2022, in stark contrast to the system of healthcare that Israelis enjoy, quote, 100 million people in America, that's 1/3, are saddled with Medicare debt, medical debt. The U.S. health system now produces debt on a mass scale, a new investigations show. Patients across the country face gut-wrenching sacrifices. Now, you would think with life expectancy declining in the United States, with people drowning in medical debt that can't get health insurance, they can't get health access to the healthcare system, where every advanced democracy, literally every advanced democracy, has universal healthcare coverage except for the United States, and yet we spend far more on our medical system than any of those other countries, that it would be a national emergency to figure out why. Why are Americans dying in such record numbers? Why are so many taking fentanyl? Why are there so many drug overdoses? Why are Americans suffering from so much debt, so much depression, so much addiction, so much suicide? Do you think the American Congress ever thinks about that? Do you see what their priorities are instead? They had a bill to pretend, to pull the wool over the eyes of the American public, to pretend that they were getting something for this $120 billion bill, the vast majority of which was going to other countries to finance other countries' wars and militaries. And they threw in a token $20 billion, a lot of which had nothing to do with border security. And it was a small percentage. And when it didn't pass, they stopped pretending that that was their priority. They stopped pretending they cared about that at all. Mitch McConnell said his priority is not border security for the United States, but border security for Ukraine. He's the leader of the Republican Party because the interests that he serves are the interest of his donors, the same donors that fund both parties. It's the same priority of the Biden White House. Mike Johnson's priority is sending money to Israel, even if it means we go further into debt and our deficit increases, both of which Republican politicians endlessly claim they're so worried about. Because the actual priority system of both parties in Congress could not be clearer. They're telling you what it is in the bills that they are now being forced to pursue and the way that they're being forced to pursue it. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.